Stonegate Group is actually the biggest pub company in the UK in terms of the number of pubs that we have in the estate. It's always, people kind of think, oh, pubs is just running pubs, but there's kind of three different arms to what we do. I'll try and really briefly summarize it. You've got what's called our managed estate, which is where we employ everybody in the pub. We centrally determine the offer, what the prices are, and the brands that people would be familiar are things like Sloan Letters and Be It One. The other end of the spectrum, you've got what we call a public and partners estate, which is actually by far and away the biggest number of pubs, around about 3,000. And that is where it's a very traditional pub model where we normally own the building. So like we're the freeholders of the building, and the publican pays rent to us and buys beer from us. But everything else that the publican does in that pub is down to them. Then we kind of got a bit in the middle that's called craft union, where again, we don't employ the operator of the craft union pub, but it is kind of our tills, it is our product in there, and it kind of sits in the middle. And there's about 500 craft union pubs, 17,000 employees, predominantly on the managed side, as you can imagine, because that's the kind of big employment model, and around about 1,200 people in our support teams or head office. About 120 of us at the minute. A lot of that is learning and development focused, because we invest heavily into our estate in terms of making sure that we're constantly refreshing our offer. And then when we do that, we go and do a lot of training with the team. We've also got a very significant kind of learning and development curricula, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But then we've got, the classic model of HR business partners, both out in the business and in our support teams, as well as teams looking after policy, reward, etc. So fairly kind of typical HR infrastructure. It kind of plays to the heart of something that we think is really important for us. So we talk a lot in the business about freedom within a framework. And if I could just touch on that a little bit. So the framework is the fact that, look, in any big business of scale, there has to be a certain level of, you do things a certain way, there's a certain process, but we never want that to become too burdensome for the business. And the freedom happens in a couple of ways. The first is actually, because a lot of our pub estate is unbranded, we want publicans and managers to bring that sense of their personality to the pub, because I think that's why people go to the pub. They actually go because they love the team behind the bar, they love the atmosphere, they love the fact that there's something different on. So it works at that level, but it also works in terms of what people bring to work in terms of themselves. One of the things that we talk about a lot is that we want people to be their authentic selves at work. We don't want the sort of standard cookie cutter, this is a Stonegate person. Actually, what we want is that diversity of background and personality that I think makes the workplace so much more enriching and engaging, and particularly in hospitality. Because in hospitality, if you're not being your genuine self, a customer's just going to see straight through that. So I think everything that we do from an HR perspective, it reflects that. Yes, you've got to have those core processes and the way that we operate things from a people perspective, but never to the extent that it becomes formulaic or it's a straitjacket or it's process for process sake. You've got to get that balance right. Our fundamental job is that when a guest walks into a pub, they feel better when they walk out than they did when they walk in. In other words, they've had a great time. And you cannot have a great time in a pub or a bar unless the team are having a great time. It's, it just won't work. And therefore, bringing that sense of loving what we do and actually enjoying ourselves with our guests, with our customers, is central to what we do.